we'll go ahead and get on with our second to last session. We are going to have a bonus session this afternoon. Pachi will talk about after that one, but I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Oh, there he is. Dr. Kevin Jensen from Utah. I've got a bio on him, and I could probably stand here for 35 minutes and read it. He has a wealth of knowledge, and he just recently retired December 31st, but he was gracious enough to come give us a talk. So please welcome Dr. Kevin.
Thank you. I'm just grateful to be here. I left Logan this morning at 8:30 and got here about a half an hour ago. So the roads were pretty dicey, to say the least. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Just a little bit about where I'm from. I'm a research geneticist. I've been working for the USDA, or had been working for the USDA for 46 years. And most of that time has been spent developing plant materials that are used in range restoration and irrigated pasture settings. The last probably 10 years, we spent the time saying, okay, we've got a lot of brand new plant materials. How can we make them work? Okay, the range is an interesting place to work. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and I don't think there's one year in the last 40 years that's been similar. Everything is different. So I hope that we can make it a little bit informal. If you've got questions, please don't be afraid to ask. So why are we here? Okay, you know, I think it's important for us to realize that we're here because of invasive species. Okay, why are we trying to restore rangelands? Okay, it's because of invasive species. And I just went on the internet, and I'm not a weed person and I'm not a herbicide person. I'm just going to tell you that right up front. I'm a plant breeder. Okay, but I went through and I said, okay, how many seeds does cheatgrass make in a plant? And anywhere between 300 and 500 seeds per plant. So I said, all right, let's say 50% of those germinate. And now we go down 3 generations and you can see how many seeds are on the ground. Okay, if only 50% of those seeds germinated. So, you know, whether you're talking about Medusa head or other annual invasives, they're just prolific seed producers. They're what we refer to as self-pollinating species. They don't need an outside plant to form a seed. They can do it all by themselves. They're also known because most of them are winter annuals, meaning that there's a bunch of them that will germinate in October and November and then just kind of lay underneath the snow until the temperature starts to come or warm up, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're gone, okay? And so when we look at those, that's really why we're here, okay? Now, the problem we have is, how do I take those pictures and turn the competition more towards the perennial plant than that annual invasive, okay? And we're going to talk about several different ways that we've done it. There's a lot of different ways out there. Perennial grass seedlings can't compete with monocultures of annual invasive weedy grasses for the most part, okay? It's very difficult for them to. And the reason it is because that perennial, if it's seeded, it's not going to start growing till later on in the spring. And the annual that germinated in October, November, as soon as that soil gets warming up, it's taking the nutrients away from that plant material. Cheatgrass problem. This is just a quick thing from Utah. Here you can see early on. Then this is in 2000 and I want to say 13. Here's where your cheatgrass was. Here's where it was there. Now here's where it is now. Okay, so we're not having a very good success in controlling these things just by throwing seed out or just by doing herbicide treatments or chemical treatments or grazing treatments. It's not happening, okay? It's continuing to get bigger and bigger. What's our challenges? Well, a lot of times we're in low precipitation, 7 to 11 inches, and unfortunately most of that comes in snow, okay? And so we're dealing with severe drought. We're also dealing with some salinity, shallow soils, saline soils, and we have the presence of the cheatgrass medusa head and halogeton. So these are some pretty major significant hurdles that we've got to overcome. Okay, so what kind of plant materials are we looking for? They've got to have a rapid establishment. They've got to be persistent, and they've got to compete with those invasive annual weeds. And then they've got to be defoliation tolerant, because we can't keep the wildlife out, okay? They're always going to be there, okay? And you may choose to graze it. Now, this is a thing, I'm sure most of you have seen this, but if we're right here in a weed-dominated state, we've got to find some energy to pick that up and get it up to a perennial state, okay? It's not going to passively go that way. There's going to have to be some inputs put into that to get there. And so as we think through the next 40 plus minutes, think of your own environment, okay? What can I do? What pressure can I bring to bear right there, whether it's technique, plant materials, management? What can I bring to bear there to go from here to here? Because that's really what we want to do in controlling our invasive annuals. So factors affecting a successful planting. I'll show you some data today and some pictures that this is really critical, okay? And it's critical because you've got to get that seed to soil contact. When you plant that seed and it drops into something like this, or in the middle of that, it's not going to germinate. It's not going to come up. You've essentially just thrown your seed away, okay? You need a firm seed bed, okay? We have the rule of thumb, if I can put my cowboy boot or work boot down on it and I can see my heel and my toe, but I don't see the inner sole inset, I've got a pretty good seed bed, okay? We see way too often seeding failures because they plant the seeds too deep. General rule of thumb is anything after half an inch, you lose 25% of your seedlings because the grasses and a lot of your forbs just won't come up, okay? They still need to be in contact, but they've got to be close to the surface. Good seed placement, that was what I talked about. We frequently use these no-till drills, and they have depth bands on them, so we can control just how deep that seeding's going. And then the proper timing, okay? And this is going to be geographically dependent, okay? And I'll share a little example. We were doing some work down in Fort Carson, Colorado, and we were trying to establish warm season grasses. And we tried for we were cool season people, and we knew what to do. We knew it all. So we went in and we planted in the fall of the year like we always do, our dormant seedings, and we failed 3 years in a row. And so we finally said, all right, what are we doing wrong? And we went and talked to our NRCS collaborator down there, and he said, oh, you need to plant it in the spring of the year, just before the moisture comes. Well, we did that, and we got great stands of our warm season grasses, okay? So it all depends. It all depends on when that moisture comes. If you're in an area where you dry up in August, first part of May, and the first part of July, you know, you really want to have that plant material in the ground so you've got that leaf stage, your plants that high so they can go through the summer, okay? If you live where the monsoons come, say North Dakota, South Dakota, or anywhere in the central Great Plains, well, the monsoons start coming at the end of June, and they last through July. So that's when you want to plant it, okay? And then the other thing that you have to look at is you have to use the right plant materials. And I'm not going to get involved a lot on the different types of plant materials because there's a lot of literature out there, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. But you need to make sure that you're using the right plant materials when you put your species down. Make sure that you know where they're adapted. So let's talk a little bit about weed control. So I'm gonna bring up some data here. We have a plant evaluation project in our lab, and you can see over here, this is how many locations we have. Okay, so we've been doing this for 30 plus years, and we try to put our plant material out all over the western United States so we can evaluate it, okay, and see what it's doing. And we'll plant it sometimes in small plots with a cone seeder, or sometimes we'll plant it with our no-till drill. Just depends on what our objectives are. And then we take stand frequency. We look at how well they come up and how well they persist. So we brought all this data together and we tried to make sense of it. And we said, is it year? We put every trait we could think of, and it boiled down to annual precipitation was the major driver. So what I want you to do is pay attention to the yellow, okay? So at greater than 12 inches, yellow is equivalent or greater than crested wheatgrass. We use crested wheatgrass as our standard because it's pretty much the best one out there as far as being able to establish and persist. Okay, so, if you look at that, I've got a lot of species that are equivalent to or greater than crested wheatgrass, which is good. That's what we want, okay? What happens when I go less than 12 inches? Where's my yellow? It's gone. And so if there's one point you can take home today, it's that we have a lot of options at 12 inches or greater. Now keep in mind, this is on 30 sites over 20 years of data, okay? When we drop below that 12 inches, we don't have a lot of options when it comes to plant materials that will persist and stay. So annual precipitation is the most critical. So what do we look at when we look at annual precip? You got to look at when it comes. What's my soil like? Is it coming and just going away, or is it staying? Okay, all of those things are major factors. Okay, species differed in their ability to establish. Most species are unable to persist over time, and the newer varieties showed increased establishment and persistence. You can see here, this is at Beaver, Utah. It's about a 14 to 16 inch precip zone. This is Dillon, Montana, less than a 10 inch, and in some years, if we get 2 inches, we're lucky. So you can see the difference. So importance of the right plant materials. This slide is one of my favorite ones. This happens to be up in Sheridan, Montana. And we get a lot of information, we get a lot of stuff out there on pollinator species and planting majority of pollinator species versus grasses. Right here, the only difference here, this legume and this is grass. That is the only difference. And everywhere you look throughout these slides, they've got the legume, the companion legume right next to it with the grass when it's included. So you ask yourself, why? What's going on? No, it's not nitrogen fixation because your legumes are right here. There's nothing, you're not seeing anything but cheatgrass. Okay, so what you've got here is think about your legumes. What's the root system like? It's a big, long taproot. So it's not taking the nutrient or the moisture off of that top, okay, which is where the cheatgrass is. The minute I add the grass, I now have the taproot below, and I have the grass the perennial grass up above, okay? And every time we've done this, this is the type of scenario we've used. And so the functional group of the plant material is important. When I say functional, the traits that are associated with that plant material. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a study that we got from the Farm Service Agency. And I won't talk about the slides for most of the time, I'll just talk. But we were approached by the Farm Service Agency because the CRP program was in trouble. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the early portions of the CRP, but it was really heavy on erosion control, all of those types of things. And so they used a lot of different plant materials that would control erosion. Well, it's moved all the way to a pollinator mix, okay? And so if you want the points so that you qualify at the highest level, we were seeing mixes that had 85% pollinators and 15% grasses. So the Forest Service the Farm Service Agency came to us and said, we've got mad farmers and ranchers because they plant these mixes and all we get is weeds. And so they're not getting their payout and they're not coming back to re-sign up. Can you tell us how we can fix this? Okay. And so that was kind of where we started. And that was what we referred to as phase one. Okay. Now we identified, at least this was a project that went over 3 ARS locations. Okay. Each location had 3 sites. So a total of 9 sites. I'm going to talk about mine. So we had 3 sites. We had Declo, Idaho, we had Ryrie, Idaho, and we had Nephi, Utah, okay? Here we're gonna get into the weed control. The Declo site was 100%, it was a failed CRP planting, and it was the most beautiful stand of cheatgrass you've ever seen in your life, okay? And we said, we wanna go in there. We wanna see what we can do, okay? The other 2, the Ryrie one was a new CRP that was going in, and we went in, and here we applied herbicide at Roundup at 22 ounces to the acre, and then we did the same thing here, spring and fall, and this was a spring and fall here. But this was still cheatgrass when we planted it with our no-till drill. These were an open, bare, good prepared seed bed. Now, when you think of the range, is that really possible? When I get a 40,000 acre burn, can I go in and do all of that to it? Probably not, okay? That's not really realistic, and that's why we wanted to go into here. So and then we had 2017 and 2018, we wanted to look at difference in years. There were 4 different seed mixes, and then each one was 1 acre with 4 replications, so the study site itself had 32 acres of research plots. So these are big. These are just not the little things that you're used to seeing. Now, just in a nutshell, this is weeds right here. So this is the Declo site after we had planted it, and 2 years after. So we were looking in here. I called it a failure. It looks pretty bad. Now, when we got underneath it, we could see the small grasses, but they were never in concentrations or densities enough to compete with the weeds. Okay, they just weren't there. This is what we found. This happens to be at our Nephi site right here, and we were able to get establishment with that good seed bed, a little higher precip. Okay, and this site here was actually featured in a bumblebee video that APIS-M put out. They came down and took data on that, and they found 100 different species of bumblebees in this Nephi plot right here, mainly sandfoin, okay? So we go to phase 2. I'm kind of ornery and stubborn, and I said, I've got to figure out what I can do to that site to get something back to it, okay? So you can see did get you got a few places here where we got some grasses that came up and some plant materials. All of these mixes include, yes? This site is about 10 inches. It's 8 to 10 inches, okay? The other two sites, the Nephi site is 13 and the Ryrie site is 16. So we sampled a fairly good range. Thank you for the question. And so it was, and then, we planted in 1718, and what happened in 1920? We had a very severe drought that came in on all aspects. So we looked at that and said, okay, what can we do? So we came into this study to overlay a bunch of treatments. So we looked at an early fall applications of idazoflam, and I just got that. That's at 5 ounces per acre that we put that on. It's pre-emergent herbicide to control annual grasses like cheatgrass, Japanese brome, ventonata, and medusa head. It works by inhibiting cellulose deposition. In other words, it affects that radical root that comes out, okay? So we wanted to see that. It's got, some of the labels would suggest it's up to 4 to 5 years residual in the soil, okay? So we wanted to see, that was to answer the question, do we have enough plant materials that are there? And if we just spray that, will we get enough plant materials there? Now realize they won't reseed into that because it's a pre-emergence. So it's got to be existing plant material, okay, that are there. A lot of times in a lot of restoration projects, people will want to just throw seed at it. They'll want to go in and clean it up and reseed it. Sometimes if you've got enough native plant materials there, or planted seed plant materials there, and you just control the invasives, you can have a wonderful stand. Because when you open it up, as you all know, you may get something worse than what was already there, okay? So then we have barley. So we got a lot of pressure from this research group and others to kind of put a nurse crop in. And I'd always been negative towards it because in those dry environments, all you're doing is taking critical moisture. But we did put a barley spring seeding, and then we replanted over the top of it in the fall with a mix. Then we did a Roundup application, one in the spring, and that was at 22 ounces, okay? And we all know that Roundup inhibits the enzymes in the skimmet pathway. Okay, then we had a plot that we mowed prior to planting in the fall, and we kind of used that as our control. And then we had a spring disc, fall Roundup, and then a planting, okay? So this is the second year after we planted and after we imposed our treatment. This is the indazoflam. Now, if you compare that to the previous slide that we went into, there were a lot of plant materials there. And the minute we removed the competition from those invasive annuals, look what came back. Here's our control. Okay? And yeah, we had some plant materials in the control, but compare the size and the difference there. You know, when this came out, when we looked at this, I went, man, this is a silver bullet. This is a silver bullet. And then we started asking questions, and it's not quite the silver bullet I thought it was, but I really think, you know, it shows you what happens when you control that annual grass pressure. Barley didn't do any good at all. Not good at all. The Roundup, close up, you know, we did have an impact. We didn't have any annual grasses the second year, but we had all kinds of broadleafs, okay? But we didn't really increase the amount of plant materials, okay? They didn't allow them to come. Spring disking, just as bad. What did we learn? With the exceptions of the Dazaflam treatment, all weed frequencies were similar in the second year after planting. Okay? The take-home message is that Roundup only had essentially all broadleaf weeds in it. It controlled it, but it didn't allow the grasses to come back. We've done some previous work with Plateau. We found that in that second year at the West Desert, we lost a lot of control on our cheatgrass. So the real take-home message is that Indaziflam really controlled and allowed our plant materials to start to work, okay? So treatment needs to provide more than 1 year weed control, okay? And over the many, many years of doing my research, really, that's the key. Now, how you decide to do that, you know, some people will do it through grazing. Some people will do it through herbicide. You know, the key is you've got to have more than 1 year to get these plant materials established. So I'm going to go to another problem that we had. So Jim Hagenbarth in Dillon, Montana contacted us, and he had this unimproved rangeland there, okay? It was nothing but blue grama and cactus, okay? And the blue grama, of course, gets about this high, and the cactus gets about this high, and he has absolutely zero forage production, zero. Okay, doesn't have a lot of cheatgrass issues, but he just doesn't have it. He wants to get rid of the cactus. He wants to get rid of the blue grama. Okay, the question is, what's the dollar value? Okay, and I want to hit this from all the way from a restoration standpoint to on public land to private land. Okay, when you look at these rangelands, the cost benefit to do something is very, very small. Okay, your rate of return on your investment is very, very small. Okay, so if you're dealing with the private sector person who has to pay the bills, that's something important to realize. Okay, they can't throw all the money in the world at it. So what did we do? We went out and we put a small study out, okay, and we asked these questions. Summer application of Roundup, no Roundup. How shall I plant, drilled or broadcast? How many of you ever asked the question, should I drill or should I broadcast? You know, sometimes you don't have any choice, okay? If you can't get a cedar up in, you can't, okay? When to plant? Fall dormant, up there, that was easy. What to plant? Okay, so we put these 3 varieties. I'm biased, I'm the one that developed them, okay? And then we waited for 3 years, okay? So again, one of the other take-home messages is that you can't get in a hurry with rangeland restoration, okay? So right here, remember the previous one where that was unimproved? This happens to be seeded high crest right here, and this is seeded Vaviloff 3 years after we seeded it. This is with Roundup, okay, broadcast, okay? Same study, again, 4 replications, no Roundup, dormant drilled, okay? Here is Roundup broadcast. Okay, there's a significant difference between these and this. Okay, now these are small plots. Jim said, hey, let's do an economic study and let's go to a bigger site. So, and I'm a glutton for punishment, so we went to a bigger site. We added a treatment. We wanted to look at uncoated seeds versus coated seeds. And I will tell you right now that the coat was the yellow jacket that is Behrenberg's coating, and this is uncoated, okay? So we were trying to do this as economically as we could, to help him. So the land preparation was a 22 ounce per acre spring application of Roundup. It was flown on with an airplane or a helicopter. We did a fall dormant no-till seeding. Right here, you can see the cedar up there on January 2020. This is the seed mix right here that we put out. We put crested, Siberian, Russian wild rye, Falcata alfalfa, and immigrant and snowstorm forage kochia. The plots were about 7 acres apiece, and it was replicated 4 times, okay? So we went in and took data in the spring of the year. And you can see, we had great grass, we had a lot of legumes, and the kochia was present. Here you can see the large plots. This shows the legumes, these red arrows, okay? We had a drought that showed up after that, and in fact, we had 2 inches of precipitation, okay, that next summer. And forage kochia, you can see the kochia right there with the red arrows. The 2 types that are out there, immigrant's been out for a long time. It's the red stem. If you drive between here and Mountain Home, you'll see a strip of it off to the left side. It's got the red stem. The other one you see there, the picture there, it's more of a gray. It's more of an upright. It's used for winter forage. And it was there. Well, we went out the summer of 2021, and this is what it looked like. I mean, I was pretty depressed. In fact, I was really depressed. I thought, we've just lost this. This is nowhere. No way can we do this. So then in 2022, they called us and said, we had a little bit more rain. They said, we want to hold a field day out to your sites, because we also had a set of smaller plots looking at individual species that we had been developing. I said, no, we don't want to go out there. That looks bad. Nothing's going to survive. And they said, oh, we really want to go out, okay? Well, we went out to put stakes in. I turned the corner, and this is what we saw, okay? And we had the field day, and I said, come see what survived, all right? And you can see that, we'll go back. You can see that we've got some significant growth there and plant materials, and there's not a lot of weeds, okay? Now, when we got finished with this bigger project, it cost about $40 an acre. That included the seed mix and the herbicide and the seeding. And Jim said, Kevin, that's on the verge of being too much for me to be able to calculate that in and to make any kind of revenue income without passing it on to my kids and grandkids. So even at our very best to try and make it work, he said, you're pushing the envelope, okay? How many times do we see seed mixes alone that are $100, $200, $300 a pound to go out? On these rangelands, these guys can't afford that. And then sometimes it's not going to work, okay? So again, another take-home message. How can I make this be more efficient? How can I help them get plant materials on the ground, okay? Now, fortunately, in this case, we went ahead and we had some other species that we worked in small plots, okay? Again, same application, other than we had a light mechanical tillage. Okay, fall dormant seeding, small plots, 8 replications. We planted at 12.5 pounds to the acre. Most of our seedings are 12.5 pounds of PLS, or they may be 15, but we don't jump up any more than that, okay? Well, here we go. So again, here's your crested wheatgrass. Okay, these are plant frequencies or stands. And we used those 2 right there as our standard. Then we came down and we picked up the thick spike wheatgrass, the slender wheatgrass, they're right there. And You know, they're short-lived, but look at them. They hung in there, okay? And this is really what I want to draw attention to. So if you look at the red square, Siberian wheatgrass are up there, but thick spike wheatgrass and slender wheatgrass are not significantly different in establishment on these harsh sites than are the cresteds and the Siberians. So all of a sudden, some of these new plant materials that are being developed, they have the ability to establish and persist. So what does that do for us? Well, all of a sudden, if I'm out there to try and do a cost share with the NRCS or the state, and they're requiring a certain amount of native plant materials to be in those mixes in order to achieve the cost share for the producer, we now have some of those that are available. Come on, here we go. For example, First Strike. This is the slender wheatgrass. First Strike is above Siberian wheatgrass and high crest, crested wheatgrass. So now I have a slender wheatgrass that I can use. It's on the market. Bannock 2, it's a thick spike wheatgrass, okay? It's a cross between two varieties of thick spike wheatgrass selected for establishment and persistence. But you know what? It's better than high crest, or it's equal to high crest, excuse me. And then we've got some blue bunch wheatgrass that are doing really well. So we can, okay? This just shows some of the data that was out there. Blue bunch wheatgrass, again, there's some tremendous potential in these new plant materials if used. Thick spike wheatgrass. Siberian wheatgrass. You've got several varieties that are currently on the market that you see, High Crest 2 and High Crest. High Crest 2 typically will establish High Crest on most sites. Siberian wheatgrass, you've got Vavilov 2, and then we've got a stabilizer down there. Stabilizer is a low-growing species, and the BLM right now uses that with forage kochia in the majority of their fire breaks to try and get on top of the fires. There you can see it right there. It's that little gray one right in the middle. Western wheatgrass. I've often said if western wheatgrass was an introduced plant material, it'd be on the noxious weed list. It's a very aggressive, has a lot of rhizomes, but it's a good soil holder, and it will compete with, once you get it established, it will compete with the invasive annuals. So, I want to switch gears for just a moment and ask the question. We constantly get heard that we want to diversify our crested wheatgrass plantings. We don't like them, okay? Now, I'm going to give you a little caveat as to why crested wheatgrass is here. In the beginning, in the 1920s, actually crested wheatgrass came into the country in the late 1800s. There was 5 collections, and it went to the East Coast and South Dakota, North Dakota, Mandan, North Dakota, and it failed on the East Coast, and they just did away with it, okay? Then came all of the land acts of the early 1900s, and everybody came in and they said, if you go out and break this ground out and you farm it, you can have it. We'll give you the title to it. Well, they did that, okay? And then what happened in the 1920s and the 30s? We got the Dust Bowl era. There's newspaper articles where it says that a windstorm dropped 20 million tons of dirt on Chicago, okay? And you've all seen pictures. Go Google pictures of the Dust Bowl era. Well, all of a sudden, the people in Mandan noticed that the only thing that was growing in this drift sand or soil was crested wheatgrass. Okay, so they, by not having any choice of their own, bought railroad cars of it, okay, and brought it in. And really, crested wheatgrass is credited for saving us from the Dust Bowl era, okay? Now, fast forward, it was planted as a monoculture. And, even up till the 40s and 50s, it was planted as a monoculture. We don't really recommend that right now. It's good grass, I love it. But we need to get some diversity. So this study here was at Desert Atlanta Livestock on the Wyoming-Utah border, and we partnered with Barenbrug and then our unit at Logan. And we wanted to see, could we diversify our plant materials? So there's the site right there. It's 66 acres. Again, I'm a glutton punishment for doing big evaluation trials. So what did we do? Okay, crested wheatgrass can be stubborn. It does what we ask it to do. So we said we want to be able to control it. So we went in the spring and we grazed it down as tight as we could. Okay, we just grazed it down to nothing. Then we let it regrow just a little bit and went in and had several different treatments using Roundup and disking and stuff like that I'll show later. And then we seeded into it. So there you can see the study site. Again, they're acre plots plus. So the first treatment was a single spring application of Roundup post-grazing. The second treatment was 2 applications of Roundup, spring, fall, post-grazing. Treatment 3 was 1 pass with an offset disc in the fall, no herbicide. Treatment 4, 2 pass with offset disc in 2 different directions, no herbicide. And then the 5th one was putting Roundup plus a fall disking, okay? So we looked at all different options, and then we went in, and then we had to control where we did nothing. Didn't even spray it. So we seeded a seed mix by Barenbrug called Barricade, and this is the species that were in it and the percentages that were there. We seeded it, because it was coated, we seeded it 22 pounds to the acre, which was really more like 11 pounds to the acre because of the seed, 12 point. We seeded it with our 10-foot Truax drill in the fall of the year. Data collection, we looked at stand frequency, or this is what we wanted to, the stand frequency of crested wheatgrass and the stand frequency of weeds. Now we planted it, and then we had less than 2 inches of rain again at this site. Okay, pretty bad. And so this, we'll go to this one. So this one kind of shows what happens with it. So 2 years after we seeded it, or a year after we seeded it, okay, I better back up. So we went back, since it failed the first year of the seeding, we just got nothing because of the drought. So we went back in with that seed mix the next year, the next fall, and reseeded it. So this is the spring of 2023. You can see the disc pass, the 2 disc pass, it essentially just cut all the crested wheatgrass plants up and left them, okay? Increased the seed. The forage yield was great because they were all small plants, broke up the crowns. If you were after biomass, it was wonderful. Here's the Roundup spring treatment versus the control. We got a little bit, okay? Roundup and disc, we got a little bit more. But look what happens when we had a spring and a fall Roundup without disturbing the soil. And you can see those are little rows of plant seedlings coming up. So again, we eliminated the competition. And when I always hear I can't control cheatgrass or crested wheatgrass, you can. And that's 22 ounces per acre, twice, one in the spring after it was grazed, and in the fall just before we planted. So my time's almost up, and I quickly want to go through again. So we did an Ely fire seeding study. Okay, we planted it, we went in, there was a fire. We didn't do anything. We didn't plant, we didn't spray, we didn't do anything. We just went in the fall and planted. And it looked like a moonscape, okay? There were no weeds. We wanted to see in these large plots, we wanted to see at what point do my treatment effects, I mean the crested wheat, the Siberian wheatgrass, control the annual invasives and at the same time allow my diversity. So we had a native seed mix that we got from the BLM, and then we had our treatments here. We went from control to nothing planted all the way up to 100% native mix, okay? And what I wanted to say was, where am I controlling my weeds? Where am I do? Well, if we look at cheatgrass, it forms a nice line, goes all the way from the control with the highest, all the way down to 100% Siberian wheatgrass, which is what we'd expect, okay? You can see the control here at the top, the 100% Siberian wheatgrass, there's no cheatgrass, okay? But I don't really want that, okay? So I looked at the effect of the seed mix, okay, and the Siberian wheatgrass. So as we increased Siberian wheatgrass, we increased the Siberian wheatgrass in the mix. So everything was set in place for us to go. So then we wanted to look at cheatgrass versus Siberian wheatgrass, okay? Well, if we look at cheatgrass, it's extremely high up there where we're in our control, no Siberian wheatgrass. What happens right here at the end is when we have 100% Siberian wheatgrass, it's also our lowest cheatgrass. So we want to be somewhere in the center there, okay? Where can we go? So we looked at the seed mix with Forbes. Again, you can see as I increased my Siberian wheatgrass, cheatgrass went down. This big line here is my Forbes, okay? Now, one of the questions that always we get asked is that our Forb plantings are outcompeted by our cheatgrass. And this would tell us something different, okay? That there's something else affecting the establishment of those Forbs, okay, on that thing. It stayed steady, okay? But these are pictures we got out of those circle treatments. Those were all in there, okay? Then we looked at the native grasses again, okay? Yeah, there was a little decline in the native grasses as we increased the Siberian wheatgrass, which is not necessarily surprising. Those are some of the native grasses, the individual grasses that we looked at. You can see that in the 100% native, the blue bunch wheatgrass, the thick spike wheatgrass was significantly better. But again, we're still pushing right around that. So we looked at the grasses, and I'm gonna go forward. We looked at the brush. We planted sagebrush. Again, you know, there was not a lot of establishment, but it wasn't contingent on there was no relationship between Siberian wheatgrass and the establishment of brush. So in conclusion, it's significant to remember that we have to be, our weed control on these ranges has to work for more than 1 year. If it doesn't, we're probably wasting our plant materials, okay? Also, realize that if we're at below 12 inches, we have to be careful. We can't throw the kitchen sink at it and put a $250 seed mix out per acre and expect that rancher to recover, because it's not going to happen. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions. Thank you again for having me come.
Any questions?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I got 2 questions. One, you mentioned early about the half-inch depth.
Okay.
Seeding, and my question is, I'd like you to comment on the theory of the soil seed, what do they call it? Soil seed bank.
Okay.
Not to see if you put it up too low, maybe the next year there's erosion. It's like, I'm curious what you see in your general comments about, is there a soil seed bank going on in some of these sites that like that?
I'll answer your second one first. I'm in the process, now that I'm retired, I'm going to spend a little time and get the data sets together. Some of these are published. They're published in a referee journal. They will be, and the other ones will be published in a referee journal. Okay, so yes, that will be there. Back to your question about a seed bank, and thank you. That's a really good question, and we constantly hear, well, okay, if I get 2 or 3 plants, or I get 5 or 6 plants, within 10 years, I'm gonna have a whole bunch of plant materials because they're gonna germinate and come up. I have to tell you, in the 40+ years that I've done research on the range, I do not see seedling recruitment after that first year, after the second year. Okay, we always see an increased stand, and this is published in REM. We always see an increase from year 1 to year 2, but after year 2, we do not see an increase. And I guess I would, if people see differently, I would really like to know, because we just do not see major shifts in plant communities after that second year. And the reason I think that it's that way is that I've either got annual grasses coming in that are out competing that seedling, even if it were to come, or there's competition from the perennial. A lot of that stuff is dropping right down near the base of that perennial plant. And if you look at if you just took a square foot and you went out on the range, you've got a limited amount of resources in that foot, okay? And once those resources are up, whether it's 1 big plant or 2 smaller plants, the resources are up. There's nothing left there to sustain that. We did a study where we looked at seed coatings, trying to affect that, okay? And what we found, and I thought it was wonderful, we went out to the West Desert and looked at fall versus spring seeding, because you lose some things when you fall seed, okay? That's a different story. But our spring seeding, we had 100% stand. I mean, it looked like it was just as thick as hair on your back, okay? And I went, wow, we're gonna do this more often. I went in August, and there wasn't a single plant left, okay? Not a single plant left. It had created a small window there for those plants to establish, but then when the drought hit, there was nothing to support them, and they were gone. So I don't see seedling recruitment. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
What was the coating you were using?
So that one was a clay coating, and I wish I could give you the exact things, but most of these seed companies, they hold that stuff pretty tight to it was from Smith Seeds, a coating that had been worked with Smith Seeds and Department of Energy, and I just know that it was clay-based. They won't tell us anything, particularly when we show there was no difference.
What are they trying to do with the coating? What is the dream of the coating?
So the dream of the coating is, can I put plant or nutrients? They're using it for some herbicides. Can I put something in there in a dry land environment that's going to give that seed a better advantage to persist? Now you have to understand where seed coating came. Seed coating came on cash crops, okay, for corn, soybean, cotton, and it was mainly came to control in the Midwest the disease, the damping off that came. But you have to understand, on those crops, they know to the 1/8 of an inch how much water they're putting on. They pretty much know what their environment's going to be that they're growing. They're all under irrigation. You take that out to the range, and we don't know any of that. How does it deal over the winter? What happens? All of my work, I have not seen. We did not see it. This one where we looked at the coated and uncoated, there was no difference in stands. Okay, and we took the same seed lot.
What kind of protein counts are you getting with those
Okay, what time, give me a little reference. What time of year are you thinking? Grazing? Excuse me, we've done both winter and summer. Most of the if you look at the spring protein counts on those, you're up around 14%. I've seen some go as high as 16 on those range grasses. Now, once you start seeing that head come up, your quality just plummets. Okay, it goes way down. When you go to the fall, I mean, we're down around 4% crude protein.
Were any of these experiments designed for long-term studies, long-term monitoring?
Yes, they're continuing to go on right now. We have one up in Cascade, Montana now that's been going. This is the 11th year. And we're looking at this one is a winter forage study on rangeland. Again, large, the producer grazes it every winter, okay? And I didn't present that, but we're staying right around 1.5 to 2 tons per acre with the grass on the highest seed mix that we've got. It's interesting that you asked that because the rancher used to graze them on 100 acres. And we've got him down now to 20 acres for 24 hours. And he figures he drops 10,000 pounds of manure on that 20 acres in a 24-hour period, and then he moves on. I was skeptical, but we're now in our 11th year. And so, yeah, the intent is that these things go away. In fact, the first study I showed where we had all those different sites, we go to most of those sites every year. It's like I say, some of them are 30 years old. And it's interesting what we see.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Notebook for you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it. Okay, if everybody just stay seated for